All right, picture this. You're an excited first-time home buyer who's slightly nervous, and you just got off the phone with the real estate agent and you're getting ready to check out your first house. Next thing you know, you get a DocuSign with an agreement stating that they're going to be your agent, and it's called a buyer-broker agreement or an exclusive right to represent. You have no idea what it is, you get nervous, and next thing you know, you cancel the appointment. What I'm going to be going over today is discussing why the exclusive right to represent is an important document for you to read over, how to understand it, what questions to ask, and why you and your agent should have one in place before doing showings. My name is Nick Africano. I'm a real estate agent based in Alexandria, Virginia, and I help all buyers and sellers throughout the DMV area, and I'm happy to go over these things with you. So, what is the buyer-broker agreement, or the exclusive right to represent document? It is a binding contract between you and your real estate agent stating that your agent represents you and your best interests in the purchase of real property or a home. And the contract maps out the agent's roles, responsibilities, and your roles and responsibilities as a buyer when searching for homes and once you go under contract. It maps out also how the agent is compensated and what that was agreed on and how long the term is for finding a property. So it's important to go through the document, understand each section, which we'll be doing today, and know, all right, what am I actually agreeing to as a buyer? Once you open up the document, the first couple things you're going to see are your name and info, the agent's name and info, the appointment of broker, so stating that, say, let's just say, use me for example, Nick Africano is legally representing you to find a property. The purpose, let's just say, is to find a residential property, or if it's to find a commercial property, and the property type, whether it's commercial, residential, a co-op, condos, whatever it is. You can map it out as broad as Virginia. So Nick Africano is helping, let's say, Jane Doe find a residential property in Virginia, or Nick Africano is representing Jane Doe with 123 Banana Street, and that is it. So you can have your criteria for the agreement to be as broad or as narrow as you would like. So if it's, hey, I just found this one property and that's what I want you to do, then it's limited to that one property. If it's, hey, look, I'm getting started and I'm going to need help, I want you to help me in all of Virginia because I'm not sure where I want to move. So you can have it as wide or as narrow as you need. This next portion is probably one of the most important pieces of the contract in understanding how long you're going to be with this agent. So it's term and expiration, and so there's a start date and an end date. It has to be clear. There has to be a defined start and end. So let's just take for today August 23rd. So you could say August 23rd, and I only want it for 30 days. So from August 23rd to September 23rd is a valid contract stating that I, Nick Africano, represents Jane Doe in this transaction. So once it's September 24th, that contract expires. Or really, in Virginia, it's 9 p.m. is the expiration date. So it would be 9 p.m. on the 23rd of September, the contract expires. So if no property is found during those 30 days, then the contract is expired, and you as the buyer can go talk to other agents in substance about purchasing real property. Now, the next thing is, oh my gosh, what if I don't like this agent, or I had a life change and I can't buy a property? How am I supposed to break the contract? That's where you want to make sure you read in the terms what the notice of termination is. And so, for example, I personally do a 1-day written notice. I just need you to send me a text or an email or a document in writing basically stating, hey Nick, I am voiding this contract as of today, or this is the 1-day notice, and that the contract will expire come time. And so, boom, it's said and done. Some agents may have a 5-day notice, 10-day notice. It does have to be in writing. Now, the big thing to make sure that you look for is there a termination fee. So some agents in their buyer-broker agreement will write that if they terminate early, they will be compensated for their time if no property is found. So some may have it as little as $1, or it could be as much as $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the scope of work that the agent's done. So just make sure you understand that if there is an early termination fee, even though you do with the written notice, you're on the hook for that money. And so make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into when doing these sort of things, because if not, then you could be in a position where you're owing an agent money for their time. All right, so the next couple portions are big ones to understand, and the first one is broker duties. And so what is your agent responsible for doing? The big one is finding you property or finding you a home, and it's more than just setting you up with an MLS search or a Zillow search or whatever. It's exploring all options and ensuring that your agent finds you the right house. And if you find one that came on Zillow or was outside of your criteria and you send it to their agent, that's one thing. But ensuring that they're doing all that they can to find you the property that you've been looking for, and showing you them within reasonable time, responding to you within reasonable time, ensuring broker to broker conversation is going well, ensuring that compliance with contracts, state, local, and federal law are being upheld, and then also disclosing any material facts or latent defects. So what those are things that would not be noticeable on, say, a visual inspection. So if there's an issue with the house, say there's a foundation issue that the listing agent told your buyer's agent, and that your agent doesn't report that to you, it doesn't tell you that, they're breaking or in breach of their broker duty. So you need to make sure that your agent is giving you all of the information, because in Virginia, for example, it's a buyer beware state or caveat emptor state. And so it's on the buyer to find these sort of things. So it's important to understand that your agent is competent to ensure that you can get those sort of things, that information sent to you in a reasonable amount of time. And then, making sure that your offer is presented well, negotiating on your behalf to ensure, or advocating on your behalf, I shouldn't say negotiating, advocating on your behalf for your offer, and ensuring that you're getting the best deal, because that is their fiduciary duties, to ensure that you get the best deal for that property. And that doesn't mean getting you below list, seller credit. That means, whatever the situation is, you're making sure that your offer is presented. So if it does mean going over a list or having certain contingencies waived, that for that time frame and for that property, that your best interests are at heart, and that the agent's not guiding you just so they can get paid. All right, so this is probably one of the biggest ones, on top of term and expiration, is compensation. So when you read the compensation portion of the buyer-broker agreement, it's going to say buyer hereby agrees to pay broker X% or a flat fee of whatever that number is agreed upon. And so it's important to understand, as the buyer, you are agreeing to pay your agent once the transaction, if they help you find a property, the transaction is complete. Now, with the NAR settlement of 2024, compensation is a line item in Virginia contracts, Maryland contracts, and DC contracts. So as a buyer, you can have your agent put their compensation to be paid for by the seller. And so it can be whatever the agreement. So if you agree to 3% or 2.5%, whatever the agreement is, you state that, all right, on top of this offer, I want my agent to put in the contract that the seller is to pay my agent 2.5% of the sales price. And so if the seller takes it, great, then your obligation to pay your agent is hereby covered by the seller, so you don't have to pay an additional 2.5% to your buyer's agent. Now, if the seller's saying, hey, we're only going to pay 2%, it is up to you and your agent, per the contract, to decide, hey, I'm not going to pay you that extra 0.5% or 0.5% of the compensation, because either I don't have the money, or I just really only want you to get what the seller is paying, which is a conversation you can have, or you can pay that agreed upon difference. So if the agent's getting 2% from the seller, you would then say, all right, I'll pay the extra 0.5% 3% because I agreed to do so into your closing costs. And so that is one thing you need to ensure as a buyer, that, hey, if I can't make up the difference, I either need to talk to my agent and say, hey, I'm not going to pay that difference, or we're going to find a property that's going to pay full price that fits my criteria that I like. So make sure you truly understand how that compensation is going to work, because you did agree to it once you sign it. So that is a very important thing, because your closing costs already is 3% more than likely. Roughly 2.5–3% in Virginia, maybe around 4% in Maryland if that's where you're looking. In DC, anywhere between 3 and 4. And then, understanding, all right, if the seller's not paying it at all, I could be paying 3% closing costs, then an additional 2.5 or 3% for my agent compensation. So just know that, all right, I need to, in any event, might be having to fill that difference. And just make sure you're okay with that, because if you're not, then you need to have a conversation with your agent beforehand, stating, hey, here's where I'm willing to pay or not pay, so make sure that's ironed out in your agreement. And then on top of that, say the expiration, or the property agreement or the buyer broker agreement expires, and you're going to see something. If the agreement expires, the agent has, say, 60 days from the time of expiration that they can still get paid. So if you guys go into contracts and the buyer broker agreement expires and you close, the agent can still get paid because they're representing you now through that contract. It's a different type of term. Or if you find a place, you write an offer, the agent can still say, hey, look, like, we're within the bounds of my time frame to get paid outside of it. So just know that you could be paying your agent even if your agreement expires and you go under contract. Now, if it expires and you write a new contract with another agent, then that portion is null and void. Just know that if you haven't found a new agent, you're under contract, and the agreement expires, you might be paying a compensation if the agent decides to seek after it. So just understand that compensation, again, is a very sensitive topic, not only for buyers but for agents as well. So just make sure you have that conversation at your first meeting with your agent that you're going to work with. All right, so let's talk about the different types of representation. So there's standard representation, which is I, Nick Africano, with Compass, and we write a contract on a property listed by, let's just say, RE/MAX. And so that's standard representation. There's brokerage 1, there's brokerage 2. We've come together to transact on a house, and that's just standard representation. I represent your fiduciary duties, and RE/MAX represents the seller's fiduciary duties. Then there's designated agency or designated representation, which can be sometimes confusing. So what that is I, Nick Africano, with Compass, and the listing agent is with Compass as well. So some people may feel like, well, if you guys are both with Compass, you're going to try to double end the deal and work for the company's best interests. That's illegal. So I, as a Compass buyer's agent, and the Compass seller's agent cannot, co-conspire with each other to do what's best for the company's interests. Our fiduciary duty lies with our client. So if you have an agent who's, with whatever brokerage, let's say brokerage XYZ, and the listing agent is with brokerage XYZ, and you feel like they're going to be taking advantage of you, make sure you have that conversation right then and there. Hey, what's going on? I feel like this isn't within my best interest. Because what you're going to have to sign is what's called a designated agency. That's that thing. So if there's 2 Compass agents, you have to sign an agreement that Compass has appointed your agent and the listing agent to represent their client. So your interests are different from the seller's interests, and so we need to make sure that is clear, because at any point that feels breached, you need to report that agent. But there's documentation that needs to be signed to ensure that you, 1, are aware of it, and 2, that you're okay with it, because you don't have to agree to that. You can say, hey, if there's any Compass listings and I don't want you looking at it because you're a Compass agent, and I just feel like something could happen where you might have the company's interests over mine. So make sure you have that interest. No, I've never heard of a scenario where that's happened, but just make sure you bring that up. And then the last one is dual agency or dual representation. Now this is a situation where your buyer's agent could also have a listing, and then they bring you to their listing and say, hey, look, I'm representing both of you, and then you could potentially agree to that. Now Compass makes that we don't allow for dual representation. I cannot represent my buyer and a seller in good faith saying that I have both of their interests at heart, because what ends up happening is that agent just plays middleman and then just says, hey, what do you want to do? So there's no advisement, and again, your agent should be advising you on what they think the sales price should be and what contingencies you should have, and what's going on in the market, so you understand, hey, this is the kind of offer we're putting in. So Compass has said no, but if your agent's brokerage allows for it, just understand that if you do allow for dual representation, that you may not be getting advised to the fullest, because that's just what it is. But if you're comfortable with it because they've got the perfect house for you, that's totally fine. Just understand what sort of situations you might be in come that time of contract. So just understand the difference between designated and dual. Designated is fine. Dual, just know that there's layers to it and that you need to be comfortable in that sort of situation. All right, so another important piece of the contract to understand is buyer default. And so what is buyer default within that agreement? So buyer default is when there is a breach of contract. So whether the agent is not representing your fiduciary duties, that is a breach on the agent's end. But for buyer default is, for example, if you were to have an assigned agreement with an agent, but you're either talking to other agents and having them write contracts for you, or going directly to the listing agent and having them write contracts for you, or essentially just cutting your agent out, but it just taking advantage of them to view homes and get access to things, you could be in default. And the agent can either then send a notice to terminate the agreement, and you could still be on the hook for compensation for their time, or if you were to go under contract, you could still be on the hook to having to pay your agent if you wrote a contract with the listing agent while having an agreement signed. This could lead to issues, and it's not meant to trap buyers. It's just more to protect the agent from doing months of work, and the buyer from making a mistake, or not showing clear signs of, hey, I have an agreement and this is my agent, because the agent in that agreement is meant to protect you if anything were to happen, because agents do have insurance and all these other things that are meant for them, so that in the event something goes wrong, there is boundaries that keep them moving forward. So just know that if you plan on talking to other agents, I would do it before signing a contract. Have interviews with multiple agents and see who's going to be the best fit for you, so that way you don't fall into default. And if there's a property that seems too good to be true and the listing agent saying, hey, you can only do it if you sign with me, talk to your agent first, because you don't want to be harmed in this in any ways, whether it's signing directly with the listing agent to get the property, or putting yourself in default. You just want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row before potentially putting yourself at risk for the breach of contract and being responsible for compensation or court fees or attorney fees or whatever it is. So just make sure that when working with your agent, be upfront and clear about your goals and expectations, and what you expect from your agent to do and what you're not willing to accept or do with your agent. So on my phone, I have 3 or 4 questions that you could ask your agent, and I'm also going to answer them for myself as well, so that you have an idea of what to ask during your interview with your agent regarding the buyer-broker agreement. So number 1, what happens if I find a home on my own, like a for sale by owner, while we are under this agreement? Now, with that, you say, hey, look, I found this on my own, I'm going to write the contract. Per the agreement, you would still be under the umbrella of the buyer-broker agreement, so you would have to pay your agent compensation. Now, you could ask if the for sale by owner seller is offering buyer-broker compensation, and if they are, great. But if not, you would still owe them compensation. So make sure you have that conversation with your agent. Hey, look, if I find a property on my own and I do the work, I don't want to pay you. So make sure you have that sort of line item in your contract, so that it clearly states, hey, if I find this on my own and I do the legwork, I'm not paying the agent. So have that conversation up front. Number 2, if the seller does not offer you buyer broker compensation, what am I responsible for paying, and how does that work at closing? So if the seller is not offering any sort of buyer broker compensation, then you would be on the hook for paying your agent. Now, the contract may state 2.5-3% because about 97 or 98% of all homes have been paying some sort of compensation. It may not be a full fee, but they're paying something. So in that 2 to 3% that aren't paying, you would need to pay your agent. But again, have that conversation with them, because a good agent will be able to work with what you can, because it may be the dream home and you may not realize, all right, I don't have the 2.5 or 3% to pay my agent. Some agents say, hey, look, if you can pay me a flat fee, or if you can pay me 1 or 2%, they'll work with you. So it's not as much money out of pocket for you. Or you can find another agreement of some sort where it's down the road, or installments or whatever. It doesn't matter. But just make sure you have that conversation with them, because that is a very sensitive topic, and it can be, depending on your market, a lot of money. Let's go. Number 3, what is your cancellation policy if things are not working out? So for me personally, it's just 1 day written notice. I don't charge an early termination fee or anything like that, because I understand how expensive home buying can be, and especially with first-time home buyers who don't have, say, a lot of money. It's to have to worry about, all right, it's not working out with this agent, or things change, I have to break this agreement. Now I have to pay how much to get out of it? But again, every agent's different and for different reasons. So there's some agents who may have like a $5,000 termination fee because they have so many amazing services that would make your life easier. So again, understand, if this isn't working out or if things change, you need to have that in writing up front, because if you just sign it and you didn't pay attention, you're on the hook and you didn't know. So that is a really important question to ask. And then the last one, and this is a little bit of a harder question to ask your agent, so really make sure that you pay attention to this answer. Can you walk me through a situation where you had to tell a buyer something they did not want to hear and how you handled it? This can vary from appraisals, low appraisals, or bad home inspections, or a myriad of reasons. And so ensuring that your agent can deliver tough news to you is a big one, because there's situations where you could have waived home inspection and something came up during the walkthrough or whatever that would have been caught in a home inspection that could be detrimental. How does the agent handle it? Or if the appraisal came in low, how do they bring that news to you? We have to deliver bad news all the time. I can only think of certain situations with sellers, so I'll just tell you, I had to talk to a client about a structural issue that was found, and we have to deal with it. Another one was I had to talk my seller through a bad roof, mold, pests, and how we're going to handle that. But for buyers, it could be, hey, look, bad electrical, bad roof, structural, and I've told clients, look, let's get ready to void. Well, here's a real one. I had a buyer in DC, and she was at the very top of her budget, and the payment would have been completely overwhelming. And I told my client, look, this isn't what you're going to want to hear, but I don't think you should buy this property because it's at the very top of your budget. The payment would be tough, and if anything goes wrong during the contract period, you're going to be in a really tough spot. So I need you to understand that you're going to be in a really tough spot with this sort of thing. And again, it's not necessarily my place, but again, my fiduciary duty and what I tell all my clients is your financial well-being is my biggest responsibility. So that also means saying no to things. So like, I don't want to just sell someone the most expensive place because they can buy it. I want to make sure that they get the best deal that they can. And that was a time where I said, look, it would not be worth buying. They decided to still put in an offer and take the chance on it. They ended up not winning, but it was something I made sure that, hey, it's not an easy conversation to tell them, hey, the home you've always wanted is the one you shouldn't buy, because it would be a strain on your wallet month to month, and could be, at the drop of a hat, if anything changes, you could be in a really bad position. So that was a tougher conversation I had with a client a little while ago. So to close everything out, the buyer-broker agreement isn't supposed to be intimidating or scary or anything like that. It's meant to define clear expectations between you and your agent, whether it's compensation, term, purpose, scope of work, whatever it might be. Read it, understand it, ask a lot of questions, and make sure, what I would advise is meeting with your agent before looking at the first house to see if the agent that you're about to meet with is the right fit, because you don't want to sign an agreement with someone that you don't want to work with and be on the hook for money you don't want to pay them. So look at the buyer-broker agreement as a binding contract, because it is one. Respect it and understand it to its fullest degree so that you can have the best home buying experience when buying your next home. I'm Nick Africano. I'm a real estate agent in the DMV area. Happy to answer any questions about any buyer-broker agreement. Every state and locality have different ones, so make sure you understand each one. So if you're looking in 3 different areas, or if you're looking in just in one area, understand it to its fullest and ask the right questions.